watching News 9 Live. This is Business Plus. I'm Kartik Malhotra. A shocking expose has come to light, one that lifted the veil on the abhorrent hiring practices of Apple's largest manufacturer, Taiwanese company Foxconn's India manufacturing plant in Chennai. A Reuters investigation has revealed that Foxconn, which is the world's largest contract electronics manufacturer and also the biggest supplier of tech behemoth Apple, discriminates. That's right, discriminates against married women while hiring at its main Chennai-based iPhone assembly plant. In essence, this unwritten yet widely understood practice within the company effectively penalizes women on their marital status. The investigative report by Reuters has been corroborated by several of employees at Foxconn, hiring agencies that work for Foxconn, as well as married women who wish to work at the company. And in unison, all parties agreed that Foxconn has been denying women equal employment opportunities under the unstated assumption that married women are less capable or less committed to their jobs. Let's look at some of the factors as to why Foxconn has a pattern of not hiring married women. Number one, Foxconn believes that post-marriage women have more family obligations. The company cited pregnancy and higher absenteeism among women once they are married. Why are women supposed to choose only one option between personal and professional lives? We asked that question on the show today. Does Foxconn believe married women are not as work-oriented as men or as unmarried women? Number two, several people point out that the company cited that the jewelry worn by married women as an issue. They believe that these metal ornaments could potentially interfere with the production process. Well, even if that happens to be true, why can't Foxconn make it amply clear as part of policy that on production premises, women should remove these ornaments? Why create ambiguity around such issues and not address them via proper policy means? However, different from the ground realities in India, Foxconn boastfully claims to uphold the highest standards of ethics to meet social responsibilities. The company's code states it is committed to a workforce free of unlawful discrimination and that the company and its suppliers should not discriminate over marital status, gender, or other factors in hiring, and yet it itself does. Now, Apple, as Foxconn's most prominent client, cannot escape scrutiny either. Apple's code for suppliers also states that they and their subsidiaries, as well as subcontractors, should not discriminate against any worker based on age, gender, marital status, and other matters. And despite this, there is a grim picture that highlights the gross inequalities perpetuated by both of the globally recognized companies, Apple as well as Foxconn. The Foxconn factory in Tamil Nadu is a microcosm of a systemic exploitation. Perhaps it's due to such factors that female labor force participation in India is at a paltry 37%. And staying with Foxconn, well, it's not the first time that women are subjected to unfair treatment by Foxconn. Back in 2022 too, Foxconn was in the spotlight for the wrong reasons. 250 factory workers, all women, fell ill after consuming food at the hostel mess run by vendors contracted by Foxconn. And this again happened near Chennai. Reporting at that time in 2022 showed by as many as 7 women were made to live in small rooms with no bed. There was just one fan and one light. These women were paid just 10,000 rupees pre-tax, amounting to some 8,800 rupees post-tax as monthly salary, even though they were promised up to double that amount. Even another one of Apple's iPhone makers, Wistron, now owned by Tata Electronics, was faced with similar challenges back in 2022. Foxconn's hiring practices and working conditions raise two permanent questions. Number one, should companies like Foxconn be put on probation by big brands like Apple until the DIE, diversity, inclusion, and equity issues at its suppliers are compliant? Can the labor law ensure marital status is not used as a tool to discriminate? We have statements from Foxconn and Apple that we will bring in later into this show. But right now, joining us to discuss this very issue is Dr. Srinath Sridharan, policy researcher and corporate advisor, as well as Rituparna Chakraborty, an independent director on multiple boards. Rituparna, let me start with you. What is happening at Foxconn is systemic of a much larger problem in India. But let's stick to Foxconn for now and come to the rest of India later. What can be done legally to ensure that discrimination on the basis of marital status is put to an end and the issue is nipped right in its bud?
Thanks for having me on the show, Kartik. I mean, first and foremost, if you're asking legally what can be done, I think the laws of the country, based on the Equal Opportunities Act, already is in place to kind of ensure that there are no discrimination by any means, whether it's in terms of gender, marital status, or otherwise. So it's really not about legality. And if you see, I mean, first and foremost, I'm in no position to validate whether what Foxconn has done has happened in reality, in what form. But what I'm saying is that such discriminations, we all know, continue in many organizations, but it's not explicit, it's largely implicit. I mean, these are things which are not something people will ever put on paper. These are things which will never be like in black and white, but it still happens. And these are the unfortunate part. The thing is that how do you now implement and how do you ensure that the laws and legalities which are already in place are actually practiced in reality? That essentially needs a much more multi-stakeholder effort to make sure that there is an absolute zero tolerance and a no-nonsense attitude, and there is an adequate amount of sensitivity across all organization, all kinds of organization. And I do understand the importance that some of these brands that you're talking about in today's show have in terms of the Indian landscape. The fact that today India is emerging as one of the biggest manufacturing base of force, the likes of Apple and God knows how many other international brands. On one hand, it has its own positives, but on the other hand, we know which is the country that we are competing against to do so. We're competing with China, and we have often heard about the kind of labor practices that are in place in countries like China. So how do we ensure that we still look at the positive and gain from the positive, but ensure that we do not fall into the same rut of the practices that our neighboring country has been used to in terms of becoming the manufacturing giant that the world sees it at, is a very important test for us as a country. So, of course, every stakeholder, the government, the state government, and organizations like the ones that we're talking about have to put in a concerted effort. And debates like the one that you're having today, Kartik, is a starting point. The point is that it's really, we're talking today, keeping these organizations in mind that this is happening at different kinds of workplaces and across different sectors and industries. That continues to be the sad reality for us.
Unfortunate that that we as a country are aware of these problems existing and we are unable to actually do much about them. Srinath, coming back to the legal point first, and we'll come to other cost competitiveness, etc., and pure business later. But just on the legal point, if 85% of factory workers are contractual and they are prohibited from making unions, can labor laws really protect them?
So not really. And I think, Kartik, here, I think this is where we have to be very careful. I mean, as much as we will have to protect the workers, we also have to protect the employees from conditions that could be very, very far compelling. For example, if you look at today, MSME or SME workforce, they have a simple challenge. And by the way, this conversation about women and married women is not just for large factories like Foxconn. If you ask MSME and SME folks, they have a challenge of recruiting married women as well. They say that they cannot afford the compliance cost in case women go for maternity leaves. So I think there are different reasons of why they're, discriminating. And I think we'll have to solve for those reasons of discrimination, because the reality is, socially and culturally in India, women are the largest caregivers. And it cuts across different economic patterns, whether they are in the upper middle class, or the lower income segment. Women are first seen as caregivers at home. And then they have to also look at workforce. So to your larger question, what do you do to non-unionized workforce and how do we reinforce their rights? I think the reality they check there is, I think we'll have to break it down not at the federal level for India. We'll have to say at the grassroots level, if we're giving permission to large factories or industrial units, what are we going to do to govern or regulate labor practices in those? Case in point, let's say, I'm taking a very hypothetical situation. Let's say Okla Industrial Estate. I mean, if that is a unit, don't look at it as Delhi or NCR and say, within Okla Industrial Unit, what are the various kinds of units, types of segments, and how can we regulate workforce there? And I think that's far easier to do from grassroots rather than giving motherhood statements saying that we will change labor practices across India.
Okay, well, let's bring up the Apple statement. In fact, Apple has issued a statement to Reuters, and let's pull that up, and I quote, this is the Apple statement, quote, "At Apple, people come first in everything we do, and we uphold the highest supply chain standards in the industry. Our code of conduct applies to all suppliers globally, regardless of where they operate, and it firmly prohibits any form of employment discrimination." When concerns about hiring practices were first raised in 2022, we immediately took action and worked with our supplier to conduct monthly audits to identify issues and ensure that our high standards were upheld. All of our suppliers in India hire married women, including Foxconn. In fact, in Foxconn's latest round of hiring, almost 25% of women are married. This is the Apple statement. I just want to juxtapose it with the Foxconn statement. Foxconn says, and I quote, "Foxconn's first priority is the well-being of our employees around the world. We hire workers of all backgrounds, genders, races, and marital status, and we do not stand for discrimination in hiring or recruitment. When we see an issue, we act, including corrective action, up to and including termination of the hiring agency." Foxconn vigorously refutes allegations of employment discrimination based on marital status, gender, religion, or any other form. We are equal opportunity employer. We provide qualified job seekers equal treatment with a wide range of employment opportunities and development prospects, as well as attractive remuneration and support. We work with relevant local agencies to ensure that all recruitment efforts follow Foxconn's recruitment standards and guidelines, as well as local labor regulations. We enhanced our management process for hiring agencies in India in 2022 and identified 4 agencies that were posting ads that did not meet our standards. We took corrective action with those agencies, and more than 20 job ads were removed. In our latest round of hiring, almost 25% of women are married. Married women are welcome to wear traditional metal ornaments while working in our facilities. What we are seeing in these two statements, Rituparna, is that the contractor, Apple in this case, is saying that it has conducted an audit in 2022 and it has insisted on correct practices being followed at Foxconn. What Foxconn is saying is that it identified the problem in 2022, it got rid of agencies which were at that time found guilty of mishiring for Foxconn, and here we are 2 years later. There is no admission of guilt. Now, I know you will not be in a position to vouch for or against these practices at Foxconn, but if we were to extend this debate outside of Foxconn to manufacturing facilities, both micro, medium, small, as well as large companies, these practices are real. What's going on in corporate India?
I think a few points I'd like to make. One is that I don't see this problem being extrapolated or being multiplied on account of there being a contractual form of employment, because even for every contractual employee, the same labor laws apply that applies to any employee who is on the rolls of any organization. So from a labor law perspective, there is absolutely no discrimination, and hence all the rights, benefits that so-called permanent employees entitled to, the contractual employees are. Also, I don't think unionization will also help the cause of women, clearly. I think history has taught us this. And if I look at India's employment history and track record, when there was much higher level of unionization to now, I don't see that women largely benefited from unionization. So unionization is also clearly not a solution to this problem.
So what is
or
the solution, Rituparna? Because, the
so
problem
why
really
don't
seems
you
to
now
be
gonna
that,
talk about some of the
the problem
practical
is
things?
companies say something and do something else, and what they do is something they don't say. So if we know and if we believe that there is a problem, can governments ensure that there are enough and more audits done, timely audits, regular audits, and those reports being made public? So
So
who
I
needs
think one
to
of the
bell the
things
cat
which
in
has
this
been
case? Should
quite
it be
a
government? Should it be unions? Should it be lawyers, advocates? Where does this start and where does this end?
one of the bummer in the recent times have been the Maternity Benefit Act, Kartik. Most people do not, or we are not talking enough about it. Essentially, what has happened is with the recent changes in the Maternity Benefit Act, 6 months of maternity benefit is being provided to women. I mean, that's honestly not the issue. The issue here is that the cost of 6 months maternity benefit completely rests on the employer of the woman. And that's, by the way, is a unique precedent in the whole world. There is no other place in the entire world where something like this happens. So I guess since that time, this unsaid discrimination, and especially in setups which are heavily dependent on women for whatever be the reason, definitely have seen a surge in these kind of unsaid, unprovable, implicit. And sometimes it may not even be top down, Karthik. Sometimes it could be completely at the discretion of a plant manager or the manager at a particular site. It could be even at a retail outlet for all we care. So I'm saying that sometimes we have to reflect. I mean, the Maternity Benefit Act was redesigned, modified, and amended, keep thinking that it's going to be of huge benefit for women, but essentially has created very wide ranging roadblocks for women, especially young women who are at the marriageable age or are married. Because every time we see that the employers or the managers are kind of guessing for all that whether when is the time when this person is going to go on maternity leave. And 6 months passed for many of this, and given that every organization is fighting hard to survive and to compete across the world, I guess these become realities and trade-offs. And the gender which gets affected the most because of these trade-offs are of course women. So I guess we do have to we have to stand back and take a much broad range of perspective on the more policing, monitoring, and audits and all of that is not going to, people will figure out innovative ways to still circumnavigate this. We do have to now take the issue at hand where we say, let's bring out constructive regulations which actually help women and all kinds of women who are not employed, women who are first time going to be joining the workforce, women who are married, women who have children. I mean, we're not even getting into that, the kind of discrimination that happened with women who are about to bear a child or has a child. So I guess this needs a completely different approach and mindset. And what we are seeing are just really tip of the iceberg.
Srinath, India is going bullish on Make in India, on manufacturing in India. We want to move from an agrarian to a services to now a manufacturing base for the world. We want to be the factory of the world. A factory for the world, producing for large brands like Apple with such discrimination literally at the shop floor. What should India do? And before that, what should a company, a brand like Apple do to ensure that its suppliers are not flouting these norms or rules of engagement?
Kartik, I think from a macro India perspective, we must keep in mind we have we have a sword around us that our labor productivity numbers are very, very low compared to even smaller manufacturing countries like Vietnam, Taiwan. So unless Indian labor productivity numbers substantially improve, I mean, classic anecdotally, I can say the amount of chai sutta breaks that we have in factories or chalta hai attitude that we have won't fly in the global labor arbitrage. If you look at, let's say, an Apple, I mean, theoretically speaking, it's a double-edged sword for the government. Let's say government goes very hard on Foxconn, and Foxconn says, okay, I'm backing up and going and setting up in Bangladesh or Taiwan. You lost out something. At the same time, I don't think Foxconn is an epidemic of factory or manufacturing model. I mean, let's say the same Tamil Nadu plants, there are enough manufacturing facilities in large facilities. I mean, look at Ashok Leyland, TVS, Hyundai. their ancillaries, and they employ a substantial amount of women workforce at the factory and the shop floor level. And they've figured out what is the cultural model. I mean, to me, just looking at the statement that you displayed on screen, it's very clear that when they speak about metal ornaments that women wear, it could be interfering or, let's say, scratching the semiconductors they might be working or assembling. If I had been the HR manager, I would have probably said, bear it in mind and do sensitivity training and include uniforms into the entire workforce. So going back to your question, I think Make in India, Foxconn is not an example for Make in India, and I don't think we should worry about Make in India. India has had a history of, I think, good labor practices evolving over a point in time. At the same time, I don't think discrimination against women is only at the workforce at the factory level. Corporate India is no different, and it's equally culpable of, I think, huge discrimination against women across hierarchy, be it at the lower income, middle management level, or the lower management level, or the glass ceiling. Even the large Indian conglomerates, take the top 10 Indian conglomerates and count how many CXOs in those groups where there will be hundreds of CXOs, how many are women? Are you telling me that in today's 21st century times of education, that you can't find women CXO to run those large conglomerates? So I think there is definitely a mindset issue that we have as a country, and it's a larger issue to solve. Coming back here, I think Ritu's point about not solving it through license Raj. You can't get factory labor inspectors and again jumping the gun, because I think whether we agree it or not, I mean, it's going to add to a level of corruption. If I were a global brand, if India doesn't play ball up to a certain point, I would go elsewhere. I mean, I think that's the reality that we have. I think our cultural nuances around how do we treat women, I think that's what needs change. And until we can solve for that, these are troubles which will keep coming and going.
Rituparna, final question to you. Is it really a mindset issue, or is it the pressure of the bottom line? And hence, you can't afford absenteeism.
It's like the worst of two worlds. Actually, it's both. So I think there is definitely a huge mindset issue that exists across everyone. I'm generalizing. I know it's a very sweeping generalization, but the mindset issue exists with both the women and men, to be honest, to kind of tackling this problem. And I'm not going to detail why I see that I include women also in the list. And of course, there is the larger issue in terms of the whole ecosystem, the environment that we've created. So I think the problem is that this is, first and foremost, that let's acknowledge it to be a problem. I think most people think that it doesn't exist and kind of try to push it under the carpet. But I think it's high time that we realize. And to be honest, you're talking about it, and I know it's making more news because of the names and brands that you're flashing on the screen. But this happens in every other organization, like Srinath rightly pointed out. I mean, you don't have to be, I just see it. It's something which in some organizations, people talk about it, some efforts are being made about it, but it's honestly exists, and we just have to accept it and move ahead. In terms of what's a constructive way of changing it, challenging ourselves day in and day out to kind of figuring out. Responsibility lies with women themselves, responsibility lies with workplace leaders, responsibility lies with government also to ensure that we are a little more, have alongside in terms of the kind of regulations, rules that we are looking for, and include women in the conversation and decision making around rules. I mean, coming out with rules with the men, with the perspective of the male members is definitely not solving the problem.
All right, Srinath, I've just got 30 seconds left on the show before we run out of time. So I just want to put one statistic here. Apple's net profit margin for the quarter ending March 2024 was 26%. Would it hurt the shareholders too much if that profit margin was 25% and that 1% could be spent on ensuring that you're not squeezing your vendors hard and not putting your vendors at a point where they have to squeeze their employees and subject themselves to such discriminatory practices, willingly or unwillingly?
So Kartik, this is a question, very, very theoretical construct. Answer will depend on who am I. If I were a shareholder of Apple, I would say, let it be. If I were an ESG investor, I'm going to say, hey, put in 2% more. It's okay if you lose, but it's all about good ESG standard. If I were, let's say, a competitor, I would use this as negative news. I think the perspectives of the stakeholder are very, very different. But the reality is, I think today everybody is trying to squeeze more and more. And I think the global outsourcing model that started about 30, 35 years ago across spectrum of manufacturing as well as services is a clear one that it is about arbitrage. It's about cost arbitrage. It's about forex arbitrage. It's not about for the love of India. I mean, for example, in our Make in India model, remember one thing. Nobody sets up a base for the love of the country or a country.
Yeah.
It's about what can I get over a 10 to 15 years of existence.
Absolutely.
And that's the reality. And I think Apple is not going to change its mind. For all you know, they might simply say, Foxconn, we may not produce in India or in the Chennai plant, or they might do something for optics.
Yeah.
But the flip side is we cannot afford to lose Foxconn out of India.
Absolutely. So it's an arbitrage, it's a labor arbitrage, it's a cost arbitrage, and unfortunately, it also seems to be an arbitrage between men and women, and within women, between married and unmarried women. With that, we've completely run out of time. Srinath, thank you so much for being here with us. Rituparna, always a pleasure having you. And that's a wrap from me here at Business Plus. News continues right here on News 9 Live.